including the pathologies and how do these pathologies appear on the radiological investigations. So first of all, we'll start with the esophageal abnormalities. So esophageal achalasia. Now esophageal achalasia, also called as primary achalasia, it refers to a failure of organized esophageal peristalsis that results in impaired relaxation of lower esophageal sphincter. You know that whenever food enters the esophagus, there is a series of peristaltic waves which propulses the food into the stomach. And when the food approaches the lower part of the esophagus, the lower esophageal sphincter, it relaxes or it opens to let the food pass into stomach. This is normal. Now, in this problem, in this pathology, what happens is the lower part of the esophagus, which is having the sphincter, it fails to relax, it fails to open. So that means it remains closed. So the food which was normally intended to pass into stomach remains in the esophagus. Okay, what will happen? It will lead to esophageal dilatation. It will lead to dysphagia. Patient will say that I am having difficulty in swallowing. Okay, and food stasis. The food will remain stagnant in the lower part of the esophagus. Now, achalasia characteristically involves a short segment, less than 3.5 centimeter of the distal esophagus that is involved. This is called primary achalasia. Now, chest X-ray, although it is not diagnostic, but when it is done incidentally in a patient suffering from achalasia, it will show a mediastinal mass with an air fluid level. Why? Because it is actually the mediastinal mass is actually the dilated esophagus having air fluid level. Why there is air fluid level? Because of the food stagnation, because the stasis of food, and also, you know, when the food stasis is there, the esophagus is having air also. So air and fluid always makes a level. So air fluid level behind the heart. Behind the heart, why? Because the mediastinal masses, esophagus, it is located posterior to the heart. So it will form an air fluid level. Also, the stomach bubble will be absent. The stomach bubble, which is normally present, can be absent in case of esophageal achalasia because food cannot reach the stomach. That's why. Okay, now fluoroscopy, barium swallow. Barium swallow is able not only to confirm that the esophagus is dilated, but it is also able to assess for mucosal abnormalities. How? See, if we do a barium swallow, okay, we put the barium suspension and the patient swallows it. What it will show you? It will show you the dilated esophagus, number one. Okay, esophagus will be dilated. Number two, food stagnation can be visible in the form of filling defects. Like this, for example. There's a large filling defect here. What is this? This is the stasis of the food particles. Now, what is this lower part showing you? Lower part is showing you a structure. And the structure is like the beak of a bird. This. Okay, that is why it is called a bird beak appearance. So esophageal achalasia shows you on fluoroscopy, on barium swallow, it shows you. Esophageal carcinoma is relatively uncommon, but unfortunately it has a very poor prognosis once diagnosed. It tends to present with increasing dysphagia, initially to solids and progressing to liquids. What does that mean? The patient will tell you, the doctor, I'm having a problem of swallowing. First of all, it was limited to only bread. When I take the bread or the solid food, I was having difficulty in swallowing it. But now, for the last few weeks, now if I drink water, it is difficult to swallow. So that is called progressive dysphagia. First was for the solids, and then now even for the liquids. Why? Because as the tumor increases in size, it obstructs the passage. Okay, now predisposing factors include alcohol and smoking, achalasia itself, asbestosis, Barrett esophagus, celiac disease, ionizing radiation, and the caustic stricture or the lye stricture. Fluoroscopy or barium swallow will show you an irregular stricture with pre-stricture dilatation and hold-up of contrast. Shouldering of the stricture, what does that mean? Shouldering of the stricture means, now this is a barium swallow, okay? This is barium swallow, AP view, and this is the lateral view. What is it showing you? It is showing you an irregular stricture in the lower part of the esophagus with See here, this is shouldering. Okay, shouldering means that the stricture is forming right angle, about right angle, you can say almost right angle with the normal parts of the esophagus. This is normal esophagus and this is abnormal. Okay, so stricture is forming like a shoulder, like the angle formed between the neck and the shoulder is right angle. Okay, in everybody of us. So about right angle, this normal esophagus is forming a right angle with the stricture. This is called shouldering. That means the stricture and the normal esophagus, they are not, the structure is not a smooth one. It is not a tapering structure. Tapering means that it gradually narrows down into a structure. This tapering means that it's a benign structure. Okay, but when you see shouldering, that means an abrupt structure. So this means you are dealing with a malignant one. Okay. Now, what about the CT scan? When you perform CT scan, also this is a very important investigation. Barium swallow is a very important investigation for dysphagia. Okay, but the definitive diagnosis is by the help of CT scan, which will not only show you the mass and also not only the definitive diagnosis, you can even take with biopsy. You can do an endoscopy and take biopsy, and that is the gold standard, and you can say the definitive diagnosis. But for staging, you need CT. Okay, so for staging purposes, when you perform a CT scan abdomen and chest with contrast, you will perform chest and abdomen both. Okay, so when you perform it with contrast, what will it show you? It will show you a large mass in the esophagus. First of all, circumferentially it is encasing it. Also, it will show you the invasion of the surrounding structures. What are the surrounding structures for the esophagus? For example, the aorta and the trachea. You know, trachea and aorta, they both lie in the vicinity of the esophagus. So the invasion of it will determine the stage. Okay. Peptic ulcer disease. Peptic ulcer disease encompasses a number of entities united by the presence of mucosal ulcerations. So peptic ulcer, or the ulcer present within the stomach or the duodenum, upper part of duodenum, it typically presents with upper abdominal pain and discomfort, which is epigastric in location and growing in character. Barium meal, when performed with liquid barium and an effervescent. So what does that statement means? We perform the barium meal with a liquid barium first of all, and then it is followed with another liquid which is called effervescent. Effervescent is any liquid which produces carbon dioxide gas. Any substance which produces gas, that is called an effervescent. Okay, like for example, if you put some salt in a cold drink, like for example a 7-Up or a Sprite, when you put salt in it, what happens? There is bubble formation immediately. That bubble formation is because of the presence of carbon dioxide. Okay, so that means salt is an effervescent. Salt is an effervescent agent. When mixed with the cold drink, it will produce bubbles. Okay, so practically we use, and similarly, if you have ever seen the calcium carbide tablets, the calcium orange colored calcium tablets, which are used after dissolution in water, what does that do? When you dissolve a tablet of calcium in water, the calcium carbide with vitamin C, it produces bubbles. Okay, this bubble production is because of the release of carbon dioxide gas in water. So we practically, for practical purposes, we can use those calcium carbide tablets as well. Okay, but why? Because we actually want to produce carbon dioxide gas in the stomach. We actually want to distend the stomach with gas. We cannot insufflate gas through the as we are doing it through the rectum. For barium enema, what we do, we put the barium and then we insufflate it with gas, air. Okay, but that air insufflation we cannot perform for the mouth. So what we do, we put an effervescent agent after we give the barium. Okay, and that effervescent agent will produce gas in the stomach. Okay, our aim is to distend the stomach with gas. Okay, so features of ulceration include pocket of barium filling the ulcer crater, edematous collar and radiating folds of mucosa away from the ulcer. So this is how ulcer looks like. This is the ulcer, which is the sloughing of the mucosa, and on barium, ulcer will be filled with the contrast, while its margins will be hypodense, or you can say black, Why? Because of edema. So any ulcer with edematous margins will be appearing like this. Center is white and the margin is black. Okay. Gastric carcinoma. Primary malignancy arising from the gastric epithelium, and it's the most common gastric malignancy. The patient will present with anorexia and weight loss as well as with abdominal pain. But again, like the esophageal carcinoma, the prognosis is not very good. Endoscopy is regarded as the most sensitive and specific diagnostic method. Endoscopy, not only it can allow the direct visualization of the tumor, but it can also allow the biopsy for cytologic or the cytological brushings for tissue diagnosis. So it's the gold standard. Endoscopy with biopsy is the gold standard for the diagnosis. But the radiological methods which can be used include the barium meal as well as apart from the barium meal, the CT scan. Okay. So in the location, most common location for the tumors is the lesser curvature. 60% of the tumors, they are present on the lesser curvature, 10% are on the greater curvature, and 30% on the gastroesophageal junction. That means any ulcer or any ulcerated mass on the lesser curvature of the stomach should be viewed with suspicion. Okay, so it should be biopsied and it should be viewed with suspicion of gastric malignancy. Now, gastric cancer, the radiological appearance. These are the morphological forms of gastric cancer. Number 1, polypoidal. It can be like a polyp, like a growth. The growth is inside the lumen here. Okay. Second, ulcerative. An ulcer can be the only sign of malignancy. So, ulcerative form of gastric cancer is actually a malignant ulcer. Third, diffuse. Now, diffuse variety means that the cancer has already grown, has already encased the stomach, but the mucosa looks normal. This diffuse variety spreads through the submucosa. So when you do the endoscopy, this is the only disadvantage of endoscopy. You do the endoscopy here and the endoscopist will tell you that mucosa seems normal, it seems fine. But there is a malignancy which is spreading submucosally. The only sign of this cancer on endoscopy will be reduced volume of the stomach, reduced capacity of the stomach. Okay, so reduced gastric capacity is the only sign. Then this is the normal mucosal pattern. Now, what is this? See, this is the barium meal having, this is done with double contrast. That's why the barium has evacuated the stomach and only the etching or the lining remains. Okay. So what is this? This is a large mass inside the stomach. When you do a CT scan also shows you this is the stomach. Okay. This entire part is the stomach. An arrow is pointing towards intraluminal mass. What is this gray thing? This is fluid. What is this black? This is air. So air and fluid mixed in the stomach with the mass. This area is the mass, showing you the vascularity as well. That means it's likely a malignant mass. Okay. So malignant intraluminal mass in the stomach. Okay. These are the differentiation, the points of differentiation between benign and malignant ulcers. So benign ulcers are mostly smooth, regular with rounded edges. They are flat and they have the smooth, regular margins. While the malignant ulcers, they mostly protrude into the lumen, and the folds surrounding the ulcer, they are nodular. Margins are overhanging and irregular. However, multiple biopsies are needed to confirm the diagnosis whether they are benign or malignant. Okay. Now we are discussing the small bowel obstruction. Small bowel obstruction accounts for about 80% of all mechanical intestinal obstruction. However, the 20% is from the large intestine. Classical presentation is cramping, abdominal pain with abdominal distension and nausea and vomiting. Patient will present with nausea, vomiting and abdominal pain. Okay, and the patient's abdomen will be distended. What are the causes of small intestinal obstruction? Causes include adhesions because of previous surgeries, hernia, intussusception, Crohn's disease, gallstone ileus, tumor and foreign body. Abdominal radiograph is sensitive for about 50 to 60%. And what will it show you? It will show you multiple dilated loops of the bowel proximal to the obstruction. Small intestinal loops, since they are more centrally oriented, so you will see the loops which are dilated in the center of the abdomen. And there should be more than 3 dilatations which are visible. More than 3 areas of dilated loops should be visible, and each area should be more than 2.5 centimeter. Okay, I will tell you what I'm talking about. So this is abdominal X-ray. Okay, this abdominal X-ray is showing you here. It is showing you multiple air fluid levels. Okay, multiple air. This is an air fluid level. This is another air fluid level. This is air and this is fluid. Okay, so multiple air fluid levels are visible in this abdominal X-ray. And what is this X-ray showing you? This X-ray is showing you a step ladder pattern. Step ladder pattern of intestinal obstruction. And what is this? These are intestinal loops, one over the other, which are dilated, distended, and this whitish colored area inside, this white area extending through the one wall to the other, this is called valvuli conniventes. Valvuli conniventes, this is the mucosal folds of the small intestine. Okay, so valvuli conniventes are visible. Air fluid levels, if the study is erect, especially suspicious if more than 2.5 centimeters in length. So normally if you 2 to 3 air fluid levels are visible in normal individuals. So if it is more than 2.5 to 3 centimeter, and if more than 3 levels they are visible, then we will label it. And in the presence of the significant clinical history, then we will label it as intestinal obstruction. Okay. Large bowel obstruction, they are often very large, they are often very huge when compared to the small intestine, because the large intestine has a capacity to massively distend. Okay, large bowel obstruction, they are far less common, about 20% only. About 20% of all bowel obstructions are large bowel obstructions. Colonic distension, secondary to gaseous, secondary to gas producing organisms in the feces. That's why it is very large. That's why the large intestine will distend much more as compared to the small intestine. And there will be collapsed distal colon. The focus of obstruction distal to that obstructing lesion, the colon will be collapsed. Proximal to that, the colon will be distended. And in case of large intestine, what will happen to the small intestine? It depends upon the duration of obstruction and the competency of the ileocecal valve. If it is of short duration, the patient comes to you earlier, the duration of obstruction is short, then enough time is not taken by the obstruction, so small intestine will be collapsed in that case. Okay, but if, for example, the patient presents late and the ileocecal valve is not that competent, it will allow the backflow of air and the contents into the small intestine. So small intestine will also be distended. Okay, so that means if you see both the small intestine and the large intestine distended, that means you are dealing with large bowel obstruction. Okay, now what is the difference between large bowel and small bowel obstruction? Large bowel obstruction is more peripheral. Okay, and small bowel obstruction is central. Now, presence of hostidations is a sign of large bowel obstruction, whereas valvuli conniventes, if present, they show small bowel obstruction. What is the difference between valvuli conniventes and hostidations? I already told you valvuli conniventes extend from the mucosal fold that extend from one wall to the other wall, complete through and through. Whereas the large bowel obstruction, the hostidation, it only is a dip in the large intestine. Okay. Distended cecum, this is if you see the cecum which is distended here in the right iliac fossa, this is a sign of large bowel obstruction. Okay, so a rounded gas shadow in the right iliac fossa which may reach to more than 10 centimeter. So this thing, that the distended cecum, is a sign of large bowel obstruction. Also, if you see the jejunum and the valvuli conniventes, see here. Remember, ileum does not show valvuli conniventes. Okay, if you are able to see the intestinal loop having valvuli conniventes, that means you are seeing the jejunum. Okay, if you are seeing the jejunum which is distended, what do you think? Where will be the obstruction? Proximal or distal? Distal. That means you are having distal obstruction at the level of the ileum. That's why jejunum is distended. Okay, proximally there is distension. Okay, so if you can compare the two, compare the valvuli conniventes through and through with the hostra, which is only a dip. It is incomplete. Okay? It is not complete through and through. So this is the difference between valvulic conniventes and Hofstra. Now, intussusception. Intussusception is a very important cause of intestinal obstruction, especially in children. And what happens is that one segment of the bowel is pulled either into itself or into its neighboring bowel. That one segment of the bowel actually goes or extends into the other bowel loop so that they both get stuck there and leading to intestinal obstruction. Now, it's an important cause of acute abdomen in children. And in children, if a child comes to you with history of intestinal obstruction, history will be the mother can told you that, doctor, my child is passing the stool which is of red color, like a jelly. It's called red jelly or red currant stool. Okay, red jelly stool in clinical history is a sign of intussusception in a child, okay, with abdominal pain. So if a child comes to you with red jelly stool and abdominal pain, you will perform ultrasound, because ultrasound can diagnose intussusception in children. Okay, so intussusception can also occur in the adult population, and then you will not perform ultrasound in the adult population. You will perform either the CT scan, or you will perform a diagnostic as well as therapeutic enema. I will tell you how it is performed. Okay, so the plain radiograph, if done, it will show you an elongated mass. Okay, and ultrasound will show you a target sign. What are these? For example, this is the ultrasound. Okay, this is the ultrasound. This is the transverse image, number one, and this is the longitudinal image. Transverse and longitudinal are the direction of the probes actually. If you put the probe in the same direction as the intestinal loop, this is the longitudinal, and if you put it right angle to the direction of the intestinal loop or the bowel loop, this is called the transverse. Okay, so this is how it is done transversely. See, there is donut sign, or you can say the target appearance. So like if you see a target board in the um, this target board is actually used in firing, the gunshot firing, or you can say the practicing. Okay, so what you see here is, this is hypoechoic. Hypoechoic means dark. Okay, alternating hypo and hyperechoic areas. That means alternating light and dark areas, or alternating light and dark rings are visualized in the transverse image. Why? Because this is bowel within a bowel. This is the inside bowel and this is the recipient bowel. Okay, this inner one is the intestinal loop which is extending into its neighbor, and the outer one is the recipient, is the receiving end. Okay, so that is how it looks like. And what about the barium, sorry, yeah, the barium enema? This is the enema done through the rectal tube. This is the tube. Okay, so when you do the barium enema, what will show you? It will show you an obstructing level, that this is the obstruction, with a claw sign. Claw means like the claw formed by the hand. This is the area beyond which the contrast will not go. Okay, this barium enema is also sometimes therapeutic. How? When you push the barium from here, what will happen? That can relieve the obstruction. Okay, so this enema can be diagnostic as well as therapeutic. Okay, ultrasound shows you a target sign or a pseudo kidney sign. Sometimes an ultrasound shows you that target appearance of mass, and you misdiagnose not actually misdiagnose, but it looks like a kidney. Okay, it resembles the ultrasonic appearances of kidney. That's why it's called pseudo kidney appearance. Okay, so this is how CT scan looks like for intussusception. The same appearance, alternating light and dark rings. CT has become the modality of choice for the assessment of acute abdomen in adults. So if somebody asks you what is the gold standard or what is the modality of choice for acute abdomen in adults, it is the CT scan. Okay, what it will show you? It will show you a bowel within bowel appearance, and in which the layers of the bowel are duplicated. Why duplicated? Because there are two bowel loops now, one inside and one is receiving. Okay, so two bowel loops, they are present. Okay, any questions till now? Okay, so now we are discussing the colorectal carcinoma. Now, colorectal carcinoma is the most common cancer of the GIT and the second most frequently diagnosed malignancy in adults. CT and MR, they both can be used, although CT is more diagnostic in terms of staging. Number of predisposing factors have been identified, including the low fiber and high fat and animal protein diet, obesity, especially in men, inflammatory bowel disease, asbestos workers, asbestos exposure, and pelvic irradiation. Morphologically, cancers can be sessile, exophatic, circumferential, ulcerated, and desmoplastic. Sessile means they are static, they do not project out. Exophatic means it's a projecting type of a cancer. Circumferential means that the cancer is encasing the entire circumference of the intestine. I will tell you what is apple core. Ulcerated means it's forming an ulcer along with a mass. Desmoplastic means that it's inciting a desmoplastic or fibrotic response. Location, mostly they are rectosigmoid. 55% of the colorectal cancers are in the area of the rectosigmoid. That means any mass in the area of the rectosigmoid or any ulcer should be viewed with suspicion. Now, this is apple core. See, if you eat all the apple, this is the core remaining. Okay, this appearance resembles the colorectal carcinoma on barium enema. This is a barium enema done. See the shouldering now. This is a very typical and very specific type of shouldering. That means the normal colon is forming a right angle with the structure, with the uh, irregular structure here. So how will you explain this barium enema image? You will say there is an irregular structure involving the visualized part of the colon with shouldering, giving rise to apple core appearance. And this is pathognomic for, characteristic for colorectal carcinoma. What will you do next? You will do a biopsy. Okay, you will do a colonoscopy, and colonoscopy, through the colonoscopy you will get a biopsy of this lesion, so that you have a histological evidence. Also you will perform CT scan abdomen pelvis with contrast, so that you are able to diagnose, and not only diagnose, but you are able to stage the tumor. This is staging CT. Okay, so this is another image, fluoroscopic image of this irregular structure. See again, this is another one, all having apple core appearances. Okay, apple core malignancy, which is showing you this is a sign of colorectal carcinoma. Okay, now pneumoperitoneum. Pneumoperitoneum, as the name indicates, pneumo means air and peritoneum means within the peritoneal cavity. So air within the peritoneal cavity, free air within the peritoneal cavity. What are the causes? Causes include perforated hollow viscera. Any hollow viscus can get perforated, including peptic ulcer disease, which can lead to perforation of the stomach or the duodenal ulcer, ischemic bowel obstruction, necrotizing enterocolitis, diverticulitis, any malignancy of the GIT, inflammatory bowel disease, and mechanical perforations, like for example, due to trauma, due to colonoscopy, during the colonoscopy, iatrogenic means that you are performing some procedure and the bowel gets perforated. Post-operative free intraperitoneal gas, post-laparoscopy and post-laparotomy, there are a few days, the gas remains within the peritoneal cavity. So when you get the diagnosis of free air under the peritoneum, always ask the patient if he has got any surgery previously. So within few days, gas can be because of a previous procedure. Okay. Erect chest X-ray is probably the most sensitive plain film for the detection of free intraperitoneal gas. However, abdominal X-ray can also show the free intraperitoneal gas, as well as abdominal X-ray also shows you double wall sign, which is called the regular sign. What is regular sign? I will tell you. First of all, see here. This is the abdominal X-ray. And what is this? This is free air under the diaphragm, gas under the diaphragm. Also, if you see, this is a X-ray of a child, and this is X-ray of an adult. Okay. Why I am saying that this is X-ray of the child? Because see the femur. The femur is having no femoral head, and the appearance is different from that. You already see the femoral head within the acetabulum. It is not like that. Okay. And the epiphysis is not formed. Even the pelvic bones are not fused together, because epiphyses have not fused yet. So that means you are dealing with a child here. So this is X-ray of a child. It shows you the luminal walls, not only the inside wall, but also the outside wall is visible. Why? Because Now both inside and outside are having air. So both walls of the intestine are visible. This is called regular sign in a child, and this sign denotes that the patient is suffering from pneumoperitoneum. Also, if you can see here, there is free air under the diaphragm. Both diaphragms are like a continuous ones. This is also called continuous diaphragm sign. Okay, so air is encircling the abdomen. Free air is encircling the abdomen, and also in children, because the abdominal viscera are soft and more mobile as compared to the adults. So in children, what you see is a football sign. What is football sign? That the pneumoperitoneum, because of pneumoperitoneum, air is enclosing the abdominal viscera, and the abdominal viscera are pushed towards the center of the abdomen and assumes a position like a football. Okay, so this is called football sign of pneumoperitoneum. Okay, everything clear till yet? Now, any questions you can ask me? Okay, now the colonic polyps. Colonic polyps, polyp is a mucosal outgrowth of the colon. Okay, mucosa, when outgrow of the colonic wall, it forms a polyp. Now, why they are important? They are important because first of all, they can lead to carcinoma. They can be the polyp can lead to carcinoma development. Secondly, the polyps can be present in multiple areas at the same time. Multiplicity is important. Okay, and progression to cancer is important. How they are diagnosed? They are diagnosed during colonoscopy, which is the gold standard for the detection. And then you will take the, if there are many polyps present, or if you see any feature which is pointing towards malignancy, you will take a biopsy. So this is how colonic polyp looks like on double contrast barium enema, and this is how colonic polyp looks like, so appears on CT scan. So when you see here, this is a mushroom shaped of appearance, mushroom appearance. This is the, this yellow color is pointing towards the stalk of the polyp, and this is the head. Okay, so this is how it looks like on double contrast barium enema. Diverticulosis refers to the presence of multiple diverticula, but it is different from diverticulitis. What is diverticulitis? Itis means inflammation. Okay, the term itis, that means inflammation. So diverticulitis means inflammation involving the diverticula. Diverticulosis means the presence of diverticula. Okay, diverticulosis means presence of multiple diverticula, and diverticulitis means inflammation and infection of one or more diverticula. Now, both single and double contrast enemas can be used. How they will appear? They will appear as barium-filled outpouchings. Okay, if you see here, this is the double contrast barium enema. What you see is multiple outpouchings of barium. Multiple. See, there are many. So this patient is suffering from diverticulosis, right? And when you see the CT scan here, there are multiple filling defects. So that means the patient is suffering from multiple diverticula or diverticulosis. Also, see here, this CT scan is done with contrast given through the rectum. So in the CT scan, which is done for the bowel, we give contrast per rectally, just like the barium enema. And then after giving the contrast per rectum, we have done this CT scan. Also, for the upper GI, we sometimes give the barium or that the ionic contrast through the mouth. Okay, we give the contrast so that we are able to see the bowel. The contrast is filling the bowel here. Okay, right. So now diverticulosis, all things are clear. Then we'll move to Crohn's disease. What is Crohn's disease? It is the idiopathic inflammatory bowel disease, which is characterized by widespread GI tract involvement, typically with skip lesions. What are skip lesions? Skip lesions means the normal areas between the lesions. That means if you are dealing with a disease having multiple areas of involvement and intervening areas are normal, that means you are dealing with Crohn's disease. Unlike the ulcerative colitis, which is involving the bowel in a continuous fashion, that I mean that if one part of the bowel is involved, the other part, its neighboring part will also get involved. Okay, and it is involving it in a retrograde fashion. The rectosigmoid area is involved, and then the surrounding area, or you can say the adjacent bowel area, that is also get involved. So skip lesions, they are diagnostic of Crohn's disease. Okay. Fluoroscopy will show you mucosal ulcers, which were initially aphthous ulcers, superficial ulcers initially, and then later they become the deep ulcers. So this is how ulcers appear. These small filling defects are actually ulcers. Okay. And then they are the deep ulcers. Okay. Ulcerative colitis. Now, this is the inflammatory bowel disease which not only predominantly affects the colon, but it also has extra-intestinal manifestations. Continuous bowel involvement without skip lesion, that is the hallmark, and transmural inflammation. That transmural means through the wall. So, the inflammation, it progresses through the wall from inner to outer. So, that means the ulcers will be deep here. And rectum is almost always involved. So if you see a pathology, if you see the inflammatory bowel disease in which the rectum is involved, and then progressively the entire colon has become involved without intervening normal areas, you are dealing with ulcerative colitis. Okay. So what this barium study show you? This is actually double contrast barium enema, and it is showing you continuous bowel involvement through the entire length of the visualized colon up till the cecum. Okay, cecum, ascending colon, hepatic flexure, transverse colon, splenic flexure, descending colon, sigmoid, rectum. This all area is involved. Okay, and what you see here, loss of cavity, narrowing. So narrowing of the visualized part of the colon along with continuous bowel involvement, that is the sign of ulcerative colitis here. Okay, ischemic colitis refers to inflammation of the colon secondary to vascular insufficiency, especially in old age. And abdominal radiograph often is normal, but sometimes it can give rise to dilatation because of ileus, because of stagnation, and also it can give rise to thumb printing sign. What is thumb printing? When you see this is a single contrast barium enema done. When you see the single contrast barium enema, or when you see plain abdominal X-ray, the intestinal loop has the appearance of thumbprints, as if somebody has placed their thumbs over thumb impressions. Okay, these are the thumb impressions. This is called thumb printing. Thumb printing has a variety of differential diagnosis. One diagnosis includes the ischemic colitis. Okay, so ischemic colitis is because of ischemia of the bowel. Okay, sigmoid volvulus. Sigmoid volvulus is actually because of twisting of the bowel upon its mesentery. Okay, and it will only happen in those bowel loops which have a mesentery, like for example a sigmoid or a cecum. Abdominal radiograph will show a large dilated loop of colon, often with a few air fluid level. Specific signs include coffee bean sign and absent rectal gas. So when you see a plain X-ray, this is a plain X-ray, what it will show you? It will show you an inverted coffee bean appearance. This area looks like or appears like a coffee bean. If you have ever seen a coffee which is ungrinded, the raw form of coffee bean, this is the shape. Okay, with a center like this. So as if you have placed a large coffee bean upside down. This is the appearance of sigmoid volvulus. Why? Because this is actually because of the twisting of the mesentery of the sigmoid. So that this is one part of the sigmoid and this is the other part, right? This one is the other part and this is the first. So it has twisted and inverted upon itself. This large area is the sigmoid volvulus on plain X-ray. If you give contrast through the rectum, single contrast, what will it show you? It will show you the point of twisting, this area. It will show you the point of obstruction, the level of obstruction. So at this area, the mesentery has got twisted. That's why this large area proximal to it is the obstructed part. Again, the coffee bean appearance with a central white line. And this beak type of an appearance is the point of twist. Right? So that means barium enema will give you a beak sign, and plain X-ray will give you an inverted coffee bean appearance. This is all from the GI pathologies. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Yes, any questions? We come to the end of this lecture.
Thank you, doctor.
Okay, thank you. So now, tomorrow, inshallah, we'll be finishing the musculoskeletal radiology, and I will be having the last extra discussion with you. For the extra discussion, I want all of you to be present and also listen attentively, and also I will ask you people questions. What X-ray you want, what system you want to discuss in the X-rays? Who is the group leader? Abdul Kareem, you are the group leader? Yes, what is the name of, who is the group leader among you? Is not here. Yes, who is the group leader? I think Kareem. Abdul Kareem is not here. So I've already discussed the IVU with you. Tomorrow I will be discussing the chest X-rays with you. Okay, and it will include the respiratory system as well as the CVS, cardiovascular system. So all of you get prepared for it. I will ask you people questions, and you will be answering me. Okay, all of you in the extra discussion.
Inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. So okay, thank you very much all.